A very warm welcome to everyone who are joining us today for this information session on the Advanced Business Analytics program by the Wharton School of Business. Thank you all for taking out time. So just to set some ground rules, if you have any questions, if you could please post those in chat or the Q&A. We will go through the presentation, post which we will keep some time. We have kept time towards the end to address your questions, but we're hopeful that, with the details that we will be sharing, most of your questions would get answered through this presentation. We have with us today Dave Poritzky, who is the program leader and the success coach for this program. He will be the one who will be really leading, and he will be crafting this journey with you, with each one of you who joined the program. Dave is the CEO of Envista Strategies. He's also an MBA in finance from the Wharton School and an MBA in international relations from the University of Pennsylvania. He's a course leader with Emeritus, with multiple schools, which include Wharton, MIT, Cambridge University, and IMD. So Dave, thank you very much for taking your time and sharing detailed insights about the program with the participants who've joined us today. So Dave, the floor is yours. I will come in again to help you moderate the questions towards the end of this presentation. And of course, in between, if there are any questions that need to be answered related to logistics, any details about the program, etc., we'll be happy to pitch in as well. Thanks, Dave.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gaurav, my dear colleague, and thanks to the folks who are behind the scenes working to make not only this presentation, but the program work. It really does take a village. We'll have the next slide, please, and we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. First of all, I am Dave Poritzky. I'll be joining you throughout the program. You'll have several lines of interaction and connection with the faculty team. And I will be not only your success coach, so I will be speaking to all of you one-on-one once you do join the program as we craft a program that's customized for your needs. In the meantime, just a little bit of housekeeping. I will state my overt preference for the Q&A tab versus the chat. If you do have questions, we won't punish you if you happen to reflexively hit chat first, because it's left-hand most on your screen. But it does allow us to catalog the questions and keep them visible. Also, there is you'll see there's a hand-raising function, but as I said, so that your colleagues can have the chance to see the questions, and also that if there are questions that we need to address offline, it's always easier to use the Q&A. But again, we will let you use your preference. So first of all, welcome. It's exciting. This program has been long in the making. We are in a world where not only is business analytics a hot topic, but business analytics education is a hot topic, and there are courses and programs that are coming online. And for Wharton to take this step into an advanced business analytics program represented a lot of decision making from the dean of Wharton on down. And we're thrilled to be working with you. It's an exciting process. So today we'll talk a little bit about why business analytics, which is not an argument that we necessarily have to make, but it's something that we can touch upon. Touch a little bit about the Wharton School and its history with business analytics. We'll run through the program in terms of not just the academic parts, but also the program journey and other elements of the program. We do have some nice data in terms of the folks who are already signed up to attend, and so we can give you a snapshot of the kind of backgrounds and industries and levels of work experience that we're expecting to see. And we can also we'll give you some information, the application process, deadline, and really any questions. This is really your forum. This is really meant as a chance for us to sit with you. We would be doing this in a different world. We would be doing this physically in a series of cities. So really any question you have about this program, we're more than happy to answer whatever we can answer today in the webinar. We will get back to you offline, but we'll see what we can tackle today. So again, welcome to all of you. And to those just joining us, we're recording the session and we will share the slides. So to the extent that you need to be caught up afterwards, we're happy to do that. You can speak with your learning advisor and we will make sure you're fully caught up. So again, I'll probably repeat this message a couple of times as people tend to dial in, when they can, and we have to respect your convenience as well. So again, welcome aboard. Thanks for taking your time out of your schedules, especially with the world as it is and as it has been. We are appreciative of the levels of commitment you have, not just toward this course, but outside of this course. And people are juggling obligations and challenges they never thought they would have to juggle. So we become a community, not just a community of learners and academicians, but also a community of people. And quite frankly, it's quite a transformative time to be together, and we look forward to spending that time with you. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. So why business analytics? Everyone is going to come into the program with his or her own answer to that question. It is not, business analytics has become a catch-all phrase. It's essentially a marriage of data science and executive decision-making. And the way I like to talk about it is really that which goes on between the world of hardcore objective data-based analytics and managerial intuition or decision-making. And sometimes the path between those two extremes happens inside one's own brain, and sometimes it happens across 1,000 people in an organization. But at some point, we want to take an analytical approach to solving business problems, and whether we want to or not, the world is doing it for us. Next slide, please. So again, we could you could find 100 different quotes on business analytics saying business analytics is important. The only to underscore that, what I would really say is that everyone is going to have their own take on business analytics. And that's not even counting the people that are selling you services on business analytics. So what you often have is a whole treasure trove of advisory companies and consultancies talking about how important business analytics is, because quite frankly, they want to build their advisory business and get these Fortune 500 CEOs and on down all caught up on the subject. But the reality is it's happening at all levels in organizations, and not just in business, but in nonprofits and government and NGOs and charitable organizations as well. So whether big data really does replace the need for 80% of all doctors, or I don't necessarily have the data to quantify how sexy a job will be as a statistician. But again, if Google says it's sexy, then I guess it's sexy. But again, bringing it over to the Wharton School, and Eric Bradlow is actually one of the professors that you will meet, whom you will meet both interact with directly and live, but also through his videos. And again, that's the demand for analytics and knowledge of analytics. Again, it's not necessarily for us to say, but it is for us to observe. And we see it not only at the sort of the top level and at the quotation level, but next slide, please. But also at the job market level. So according to the Wharton Business Analytics Department, this is their official word on it, or really our official word, because we're all doing this together now. Business analytics has emerged in recent years as a powerful and required capability for firms in competitive markets. The quantity, quality, and diversity of available data have never been greater, which has created new and significant opportunities for organizations to use data to improve their decisions with respect to both internal resources as well as external interactions with suppliers and customers. So again, whether you're using data for what we often call offensive capabilities, competitive advantage, revenue enhancement, and profitability, defensive capabilities, risk mitigation, cost reduction, expense reduction, whether you're using it internally. We'll have a whole subset on people analytics. In fact, there's an entire course elective on HR management and people analytics. Those of you who were on before the start, we were just chatting a little bit about some of our findings there. So the world of analytics is not limited to some of these top line interactions, but really throughout organizations. And it's become a topic, again, that business schools and academic institutions have had to respond to quite vigorously over the last 5 to 10 years. Next slide, please. Then, of course, we get to the job market. And again, you can't have a business school program without talking about the career development aspect of this. And we take that responsibility very seriously in our world as well. So again, numbers what I would say is that the numbers have a subjective element to them, but they're all pointing in the same direction. Um, Again, whether it's 90% plus of companies saying that AI machine learning are key to their goals, whether it's on the senior executive level, or even bringing it home to COVID-19. As you know, the mark of COVID, as we look back on this time in our history, there is a tragic element, to be sure, and it's touched many of us personally as well as professionally. From a data analytics perspective, though, it is also, I don't want to say silver lining, because quite frankly, that can be trite and in some cases insensitive. But I do want to say it has acted as a catalyst in many respects toward the role of analytics in the marketplace. And it's something that we, as we look at the world, not necessarily moving on post-COVID, but using the pandemic as a transformative device, and how much of business analytics has been altered, or how the trajectory of business analytics has been altered. And we're certainly not going to shy away from that in the program. Next slide, please. So then we get to Wharton. As many of you know, and as we like to say, Wharton was the first ever business school. And that's ingrained in it. When I got my MBA 20 years ago, I think they spent the first 2 days telling us about Wharton's place in history. Essentially, business schools started as tools to enhance productivity on the factory floor. So most of the initial business schools, in fact, the Joseph Wharton, whom the Wharton School is named after, really was the Wharton interaction began as ways to improve steel production. So you talk about being located in Philadelphia. Well, guess what? About 2 hours away was essentially the Western world's capital of steel production. And essentially, that's how Wharton came into being. Was the wealthiest and most, at the time anyway, arguably the most vital industries had to do with steel production, and they were all looking for ways to improve processes. So throughout history, Wharton has stood witness to some of the biggest advances in analytics. And analytics really is described as using data to improve processes in many ways. So again, some highlights here, a couple Nobel Prizes sprinkled in there, but also market research. I'm even looking at something like conjoint analysis, which is used today as a vital data analytics tool. So as the context has changed, the role of Wharton has continued to the point where, next slide, please. If you look today, many of Wharton's research center. Wharton has 20 plus research centers. And what research centers is, Wharton is somewhat unique in this world because it makes its living as a business school. And because we are constantly reaching out to, not just to students, but to faculty and to business and organizations and governments. And quite frankly, they're reaching out to us. What we've been able to do is form a series of research centers so that by topic, each faculty member, in addition to his or her teaching responsibilities, will be part of at least one of these research centers, which doubles as a hub for continuous production, whether it's white papers or statistical techniques or even data sets and data lakes. It also has to do with a lot of the ways that the companies continue to collaborate with the business school. And it's a way for professors to stay fresh. It's also a way for students and course participants to stay involved. You will see professors with affiliations from at least 5 of these research centers during the course, and probably more as we build out the roster of guest speakers and occasional case examples. So these research centers are, I don't want to say it's unique to Wharton, but I will say Wharton has done a good job of cornering the market on some of the research production, not just in the country, but throughout the world. Next slide, please. So here we are, the Wharton Advanced Business Analytics program. As I said, this is a major step forward. It's taken only by a select few business schools who really have the capacity to take a certificate program and turn it into something that really becomes much more transformative, much more involved, and much more in depth. And in order to do that, you have to have the faculty that can make it work. You have to have the brand excellence. You have to have the physical site and capabilities, because part of the program will take place on campus. And quite frankly, you have to have the academic rigor to make it worth your while. So we're so pleased to announce the inaugural run of the Wharton Advanced Business Analytics program. Again, we will see this unfold over the next 12 months, beginning March 31st, which will end with a core elective on-campus immersion and a certificate in your hands. But it is a journey to get there. So let's talk about that a little bit. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about all these features in a little bit more depth, but if I were to summarize this and many of you have seen this through our marketing materials or through your initial discussions, we have a 20-week core program that is being finalized as we speak. So the material is cutting edge. The professors, even if they've written coursework before, even if they've done other certificate courses before, they are asked to develop brand new content for this course. It will be fresh, even over subsequent runs of the product. It will be tweaked, but the March 31st, you are getting entirely fresh and new content in a 20-week core program that is spread over 6 modules within that program, and we'll discuss those in more depth. Uniquely to this program, we also have an elective program. Right now, you have a choice of 6 electives. And these electives, 5 electives, but this number will increase over time. They're 2 6-week online program electives. You have a choice. Some of them are driven by industry, some of them are driven by function. Again, we want to make sure that you can tailor this program to your needs, because as similar as or as widely applicable, I should say, as business analytics is across industries, there are also some in-depth applications that you may want or decidedly decide not to want. And so we want to make sure the elective program works for you. So everyone will take the core program. You will then have the choice to take 2 of several available online electives. And then also unique to this program is a 1-week immersion course at the Wharton School. And one of the nice elements of this is you're not spending a week being shepherded around the campus store or as a tour group or listening to speakers you don't want to listen to. You will spend that week taking a course entirely of your choosing. In fact, you will time your visit to campus based on the offering of your choosing. And those courses are not limited to the business analytics realm. In fact, we encourage you to step outside that realm, and you'll see whether it's strategy or finance or marketing. You'll have plenty of chances to take courses, quite frankly, out of your comfort zone or on a general level, as I said, like a general leadership level, that you may not have a chance to do otherwise, or it certainly may not be as convenient to do otherwise. We will have a growing number of leading industry executives come and speak to you. We will have the on-demand videos and live faculty webinars. That piece is important. On-demand videos or asynchronous learning is, you're all busy professionals. Frankly, that's what this course is targeted to, experienced professionals who have things to do during the day. And quite frankly, you're not able to take 2 years out of your life or a year and a half out of your life and spend it on a physical campus somewhere or even online. And so that's the idea of taking the bulk of the knowledge transfer occurs at your convenience in bits and bytes. And so the actual videos are brief. There's usually about anywhere between 60 and 80 minutes of video each week, but it's divided up into digestible chunks. And you can, as I said, you can watch 5 videos during a 5-minute video during a lunch period or during a coffee break. We used to say during a commute, and we will return to those times soon, and they're very commute friendly. Or you can sit yourself down for a couple of hours in a quiet place and go through the full lesson. At the same time, there is infrastructure each week. There are assignments. There are quiz-based questions, and we do have live faculty webinars. About every other week, you will have a live something, whether it's a faculty webinar or a fireside chat. And it's really, it's important for us to engender this sense of community, not only with your fellow learners, but also with some of the faculty members. All classes, as you will see, are led by tenured Wharton faculty. And I say that because there is competition out there, and we want to make sure that this course is right for you. One of the elements of this course is in order for in order to lead a webinar or to lead even to host a video, an on-demand video, you have to be a associate professor or professor at Wharton, a tenured professor at Wharton. That really, the nice thing about Wharton is it is a center of excellence. The entire course, and you will be in contact with something like 20 professors, and we'll get into some of the specific names in the presentation. Each of those professors is a full-time faculty member, and they are all contained within the Wharton School. This is not a University of Pennsylvania program. This is not, Wharton has the resources throughout business analytics. I should say it is a University of Pennsylvania, but it's entirely contained within the Wharton School. The reason we do that is because these faculty, they know each other, they interact offline. And so to have strangers speaking with other strangers just doesn't work. We want to create a sense of community, and also for the faculty to be able to refer to one another's work. We also have weekly office hour sessions. That's where we have TAs or program leaders, such as myself and others who have similar backgrounds and profiles, where you have people with teaching experience, with a connection to the Wharton program, but also who can act as that common thread, that everyday contact on the faculty team. So it's akin to having a lecture series and a small group webinar, but also having the office hours. And office hours are fair game for clarifications, questions, discussions, etc. Customized learning journey and dedicated success coach. This is unique to our program, and it's something that we take very seriously. As I mentioned to the folks who logged in early before the call, myself or somebody like me, we will be speaking to you directly from the moment you sign onto the program, throughout your core program, throughout the 20 weeks, throughout the elective process as you choose which electives are right for you, throughout the immersion process as you gauge which immersion program is right for you, and then even after graduation from the program. That includes services like making sure you're set up well in terms of academically, administratively, everything is going well with the program, but also looking at your career goals and ambitions beyond the program. Anything from resume review to working with you to make suggestions in terms of particular people to contact inside and outside of your industry. Again, the path to your career path, your success path is going to be different, and is really going to depend on who you are as a person, as a professional, and as an executive. It's our job to get to know you in all three capacities and try to walk alongside of you and essentially act as a concierge throughout the program. So those are the highlights. I'm going to spend a few minutes running through some of these aspects in more detail. I do want to leave a lot of time at the end for questions. So again, as the questions arise, feel free to populate the Q&A box, and we'll continue throughout. Next slide, please. So some of these features, again, we talked about a success coach. Peer learning is important. Now, we're not going to mandate you having this is not a drum circle of peers where you're forced to have a discussion every week and share knowledge and teach each other or have those responsibilities. What we mean to emphasize here is the sense of community and, quite frankly, the experiential learning that goes on when you do form a cohort of fellow learners. I promise you, by week 2 of the course, we're all going to be knowing each other quite well. We will be sharing perspectives from our various industry lenses, our various experiential lenses. You're going to have people with 5 years of work experience, or really more like 10 years work experience, talking to people with 35 or 40 years work experience from a variety of industries, moderated by the faculty team, by the program leaders. And in this community learning, it's a major part of any business school program. It's something that Wharton takes very seriously. Same thing with practitioner insights and the concept of lifelong learning as well. We want you to be part of this community, not for the duration of the program, for the 12 months, but also for a series of networking events, thought leadership articles, newsletter services. This is a lifelong learning process. The other piece of this which is something that is quite unique to this program, is the path to alumni status. Now, this is a bit of a two-layered process where, as you go through the program, Wharton will review. There's a board at Wharton that reviews your experience level, and subject to a few further qualifications. And again, it's the application process is very similar to this course, but you'll be evaluated for your path to alumni status. It's as I said, it's a nice add-on to the course. If that goes successfully, then you do join the network of not only the Advanced Business Analytics Program alumni, but also the general Wharton alumni, and that includes benefits ranging from alumni clubs and networks and groupings. And we'll talk about that later in the presentation. Next slide, please. A little bit more on the alumni status, because we get questions about this all the time. And again, this is something that Wharton, as a sign of commitment to this program, and quite frankly, as a sign of the seriousness of this program and the seriousness of the people involved. So these are the general criteria. If you meet these criteria for qualification, again, not only will you have no problem getting admitted into this program, but you shouldn't have a problem getting admitted to alumni status later on. So again, we're happy to answer some of those questions. We may have to answer offline because they're quite individual in nature. But again, we'll do our best to address them as best as we can. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the program itself, again, we've developed a series of learning outcomes. This informs essentially the structure of our entire core program, as well as some of the electives. But one I did want to highlight, it's the idea of cutting edge Wharton thought leadership applied to real world business problems. We don't forget either end of that. And that's not just the caliber of the faculty leading the discussions and working with you on a regular basis, but also not being afraid to essentially, go under the covers, under the hood, whatever metaphor you want to use, and examine real world problems. And some of those can be taken right from the headlines. We're going to have guest speakers who are going and live faculty webinars who are going to be dealing with items in the news that very day. Others are transformative problems that have an extremely long shelf life. In other words, they can be applied to situations well beyond their immediate challenge. We also have a capstone project. It's important to us that you have something from this class other than the certificate to take back to your organization, to your career development, to your job search, wherever you are. And that we are going to be working on what we call a roadmap project. And it's a digital transformation roadmap. What it basically means is, how can you then take this business analytics knowledge, this business analytics insight that you've gleaned from the course, and apply it to a real challenge or problem your business has. Now, we'll always come across the discussion of whether or how to give, we don't ask you to traffic or confide proprietary information. We're not asking you to dig into business problems that we have no business solving. But again, every business has a series of challenges everywhere. And so we find this to be, when we've had similar experiences with other courses, we found this kind of project to be extraordinarily rewarding, because this is you choosing the project you want to solve. And so this capstone project will be revisited. I believe there are 7 checkpoints throughout the 20-week core module. Each of those checkpoints you are going to be reviewing. It's equivalent to having essentially a final exam or final project, without the all-nighters and the Mountain Dews and the coffees staying up to your multiple choice final exam that you forget the next day. This capstone project you will certainly not forget. Next slide, please. So the next 3 slides are going to be just a snapshot of our faculty. These folks are great. I've worked with many of them already in designing this project. I've sat in some of the many of the design meetings actually, but also in related courses as well. You're really getting some of the best and brightest in the field. Also, some of the more popular professors when it comes to MBA student feedback and executive program feedback to this date. So as you know, Wharton has had an executive program for quite some time, and these professors have really, not only are they well regarded by the course participants and student body, but they also like it. They will tell me offline, and I happen to agree with this in my own instruction. Executive students are the hardest to teach. because you all know a lot coming in. You all have pockets of expertise in your specific industries and areas that you are all, you're not molding 19-year-old undergrads who are just willing to swallow whole anything the professor says. On the other hand, you're also you're challenging the professor. And so you're the hardest to teach because you know what you know, and you may agree or disagree with how the professor is painting that picture. On the other hand, the level of discussions that we have and your practical real world experience just adds an incredible layer of depth to almost anything we do as a community. So we'll run through the next slide as well. Again, great selection of professors. Prasanna Tambe, or Sunny Tambe, is the lead professor of our core program. He's an extraordinarily popular professor on the Wharton campus. We were lucky to snag him into this program, and he will be your academic director of the core program. But you will hear from all of the professors mentioned here. And then, of course, a series of guest speakers who essentially they've bugged their friends and colleagues to take part in this course. So you see the next slide. You'll see a growing assortment. This group will only grow. But again, to the point of Wharton dedicating its best and brightest, you're getting folks that have subject matter expertise, have experience dealing with executive students, in some cases are executives themselves, and this list will grow over time. Next slide, please. A bit on the program schedule. Again, we are designing this with flexibility and rigor in mind, which sounds paradoxical or oxymoronic, but you'll see that it really does have a way of fitting within your schedule and staying rigorous at the same time. The first 20 weeks will be comprised of 6 core modules, starting from and 0 prerequisites are required for this course. It will be intense. There will be moments where you say, what the heck is this? And we will be working with you through the office hour process, through the success coach. And then there will be other moments where you say, aha, I remember this from last week, or I remember this from my other job. So the idea is to mix that all together in a way that paints a complete picture. So again, we have 6 core modules, which we will go into a little bit further. You can take a choice of 2 online electives. These are our current 6 electives that we have right now. And I was right in the beginning, I said 6, where we look at healthcare analytics and financial services analytics, which is going to have more of a corporate finance bent, marketing analytics, pricing analytics, HR analytics, as I mentioned, and also analytics for online businesses, which should be coming online quite soon. And then the on-campus elective, which you'll have a choice of about 25 courses that fit in those 4 buckets. And again, we'll look at that in a little bit more detail. But in the interest of time and getting your questions, I'm going to breeze through a little bit. But the idea is that in those 12 months, from the end of March 2021 through February 2022, you will have those 3 components, including the week that you decide to spend on campus with us in Philadelphia. Next slide, please. So our core modules, as I said, we start from the beginning, which is why business analytics and what is missing, what are the gaps in the executive suite where business analytics or data analytics can fill or serve a function. And then we get into the weeds. And throughout the program, we are not afraid to talk about machine learning, artificial intelligence, neural networks, descriptive, predictive, prescriptive analytics. Not just that, we also have a constant, I think about 3 or 4 times during the modules, we will be talking about the legal and ethical implications. Again, when I look for what's unique about this course, we've asked one of Wharton's top lawyers, top professors of business ethics and legal issues to come in and essentially act as a constant guideline, because part of what's dealing with analytics is whether it's ethics or privacy or governance or regulation, not just acting as a check mechanism or as a counterbalance for business analytics, but also as part of the process. So how can we incorporate best practices and also avoid some of the key mistakes that have been made in the last 2 decades? So again, we will cover all of these topics and more. Some of it we will be covering data visualization. We'll look at Tableau. We will look at several different case studies in industries. It's going to be an intense 20 weeks. But no more than 4 to 6 hours a week of your time. And in some cases, you can probably breeze through it a little bit more quickly. In other cases, you might want to spend more time. Again, respecting your time and your schedule and your need for flexibility. but the time you give us, we're going to fill it. Next slide, please. Just some of the companies we're going to cover, and there are still finishing touches being put on the core module as we speak. So not only these names could not only change, but quite frankly, that this list could grow by quite some time. But the idea is looking at successes and failures, companies that not only have used data to solve their big picture problems, but companies that have also made mistakes or been on the wrong side of ethical decisions, but also companies that have evolved, and quite frankly, that pockets of their experiences can be applicable to yours. So we're not in this class to understand how Amazon sells a lot of products, but we are looking at some of the methodologies that Amazon uses that might be transferable to what you do for a living in your organization. And whether it's Amazon or anywhere else, again, we're not afraid to look at some of these names. The nice thing is, and as you get to the individual professors, many of these professors have consulted for these organizations. Many of them have ongoing relationships with these organizations, and there are certain boundaries in terms of what they can and can't discuss. But they can certainly talk about that from a point of a very close acquaintanceship. So it's exciting. I mean, again, you can't have business school without having case studies. You can't have case studies without having names you know, and ways that we can apply those successes and failures to our own experiences. Next slide, please. Then, of course, we get to the online elective programs, as I mentioned before. This is unique. Again, everyone is not going to be interested in analytics and healthcare, but for those, for those who are, again, looking at healthcare analytics from a disease management process perspective, from a hospital care perspective, from a pharma perspective, from a clinical care perspective. Again, we want to make sure we cover the gamut. What we find is that for people who are interested in these sectors, they're often experiencing it as a consumer, sometimes experiencing it as a professional, sometimes experiencing it as general interest. We also find that there is an incredible amount of transferability. So while there are some analytic techniques that are being used in healthcare that are also being used in marketing and pricing, others are unique to their respective sectors. So they are taught, they're standalone elective courses. They're taught by different professors. They're going through their own individual design processes, and they will be, as I said, on the menu as electives as you go through the course. Next slide, please. And then we talked about the immersion electives. I'd actually skip to the next slide. And those Immersion, as we look at finance, leadership, marketing, and innovation, we actually look at these are actual courses that are on the menu right now. Of course, these are subject to change, but again, these courses have been reasonably popular. So I'd imagine if you don't see these specific courses, you'll see courses just like this. The point is, when you're on campus, we want you to spend that week. It's really a 5-day course. So we want you to spend that 5-day week taking courses you want to take. We've seen programs that bring you to campus, and again, you're sitting through guest speakers and you're essentially being given the VIP treatment, but are you learning what you want to learn? Here, we're going to work with you, and in many cases, I'll be working with you as your success coach to help determine which of these areas represents something that, based on the course, based on the faculty member, based on your appetite at the time, will take you to where you want to go outside of the realm of business analytics. Business analytics is part and parcel of a broader process, and we want to make sure we're sensitive to that. Plus, it's a chance to spend a week in Philadelphia. Right now, as of right now, we are looking like the fall will be, and again, knock on every piece of wood and spit in the wind 3 times on every bit of superstition you can use. But our hope is that academic life or on-campus life will be more or less back to normal beginning in the fall. To the extent that that's not true, all of these courses have the capacity to be offered on a live virtual basis, meaning that they're still live and you'll still get many of the benefits of interaction, even if you're not on campus. But again, we will work with you. And if that means waiting a couple of months to take the right course because of the pandemic, again, we cannot be where we are without having a degree of flexibility built into the program. But these are our expectations now, beginning in that elective period, which would take place beginning in September once the core period is over. Next slide, please. So again, you see the on-campus immersion features. The other piece is you'll have additional activities. We will work in. You will have a chance to visit with faculty members whom you know from the business analytics program. We will make sure to get you out and about and exploring the campus of the University of Pennsylvania and the Wharton School. and also taking advantage of the fact that it's a 15-minute walk from Center City, Philadelphia. So we will certainly we will work with you to take full advantage of your week in Philly. Next slide, please. And then again, we know from some of you here who are now braving the weather in Texas that you can also deal with winter in Philly. So we're not going to shy away from that. So just to recap, again, it's a 12-month journey. It really, I mean, those faculty members, they don't come easy, they don't come cheap. These are the best and brightest. We're thrilled to have them involved. You'll see them online. You'll see some of them on campus. The idea of rigor and flexibility, those two can go together if they're managed right. This is going to be a tough program. We wouldn't be doing this as Wharton if we weren't ready to take the next step. Beyond that, it's also an advanced business analytics program. There are plenty of individual business analytics courses out there. Some are quite good. What we've seen is a request or a demand for a level of depth, partly because business analytics is taking over the executive suite and business analytics has become much more popular, but partly because once you go beyond an introductory or survey level course, there is an expected amount of rigor, and you're going to get that in a school like Wharton. And our job is to present that in a way that works best for you. And again, it's that combination of core and elective, online, offline, mandated and choice. It really is. It's a combination of all those elements. Can't say enough about the business analytics faculty. I mean, Wharton started business analytics, the best, and the fact that this is where the faculty go. Wharton has a reputation as being a work hard, play hard school in many respects, and I think that pervades into the executive management programs that it's enjoyed over the last several decades. Again, the week-long elective experience. It also is a chance to meet people outside of the advanced business analytics program. You'll meet other students, other executives who are in, again, you're confined, you will stay, not just in terms of lodging, but just also in terms of the work you do. You'll interact with other executives who are not in the business analytics program as well. So it is a networking event just as much as it's an academic event. And of course, you join a lifelong network. By joining our certificate program, you not only have a cohort of learners, and you will have anywhere between 25 and 50 people in our first run of a program. Generally, you get about 50 people in sort of the subsequent runs. So it's a small enough group that you all get to know each other quite well. And that said, it's a large enough network in terms of the cumulative network of advanced business analytics program participants and other certificate program. And again, for many of you also with the alumni status, you will join that group of 100,000 plus. Next slide, please. And of course, this is a credential. We are in a world right now where in the last 10 years or so, certificate programs have taken off. Again, in terms of flexibility, in terms of accessibility, the idea of what we used to refer to in a friendly way as a stackable micro-credential, this signifies to you, to your employers, to your colleagues, to your career advisors, again, that you have taken the time and effort to complete a 20-week course, to complete a 12-month experience, a 20-week core course, the 12-week electives, and then the on-campus program. And so you will certainly get that. You will get that experience as well. And the certificate is a nice piece of paper and a nice digital piece of paper to have. Next slide, please. So a quick bit about you, and then I'll open it up for more questions. Who should generally attend this program? This program was built for experienced managers and executives. So we don't hold, we say 35 plus or 10 years plus of work experience. If you're 34 with 9 years of work experience, it doesn't mean you shouldn't apply to the course. Again, this is who the course was developed for as a broad target. These are the general functions, the general job titles. Again, a lot of it also depends on the size and shape of your organization. As I said, the distance between data science and executive decision-making can happen in the sign of one brain, and it can happen across 1,000 people in a major organization. In both cases, having an in-depth understanding of data analytics as it applies to business analytics is important no matter what kind of organization you're in. where you are in that organization in terms of your job title might be as dependent on the nature and size of the organization as it is on you and your career progression. So it's a reasonably broad audience, but again, these are the functions where not only have we had our first admits sign up for the program through these functions, but also this is what the program was designed for by a team of professors and course designers. Next slide, please. And then here you are. Here you are in terms of who actually is coming to the program. So you have your industries represented. I think, you know, as you look at this from an analytics perspective, you can draw certain conclusions, and arguably the single biggest conclusion is the breadth of applicability of business analytics. There is no one industry or one job function that is most helped or augmented by business analytics. It represents both a challenge and an opportunity. It is a challenge to make sure that our course is rigorous enough and broad enough and deep enough to make sure it's interesting for everybody. And thankfully, we've been doing this for a little while, so we have a reasonably good idea that this will hit the mark. On the other hand, it also gives the breadth of discussion in the classroom, and that's not something that can be replicated from run to run. It's going to be unique every time we run the course. And so every time you have a perspective from your industry or your organization, it's important to share. And so this is who you are. This is real data literally as of this morning. Next slide, please. So in terms of work experience, again, you are seeing a reasonable degree. You know, that whole notion of really 15 or more years of work experience, let's say 10 or more years of work experience, covering about 85% of the course participants. That's consistent. If you have, you know, fewer than 10 years or even less than 5 years of work experience, there tends to be a very good reason why you would take this course, and sometimes exceptions are extraordinarily welcome, and and same thing when you have people on the other end of the job of the career ladder, but you have that sort of that median area. And then geographic locations. We will have a strong US presence, especially as we talk about the week-long immersion program. At the same time, the fact that we do have flexibility built in and that you can take the week at a week of your choosing allows us to have a broader international bent. So really, we'll see probably about 50-50 once this is all said and done, US and international. Next slide, please. So again, just some key dates. We've passed the first round of application deadlines, but we still have a couple of weeks for the second round. So you still have time, plenty of time. And then the course doesn't start until March 31st. So there's plenty of time for you to get this together. The application is not arduous. It's an administrative process, but we want to make sure that your goals and aspirations and experiences are lined up with the expectations of the course. And again, Wharton is directly involved in assessing the applications and making sure that this fits the program. And again, the program schedule, the core program starts on March 31st. So April, May, June, July, August will be the core program. It's essentially 20 weeks plus a week-long orientation. And then the elective period is September 21 through February 2022, meaning you can take your 2 6-week electives and your 1-week immersion program at a time of your choosing in that period. Next slide, please. And now we'll get to the Q&A. So I know my colleagues have jumped in behind the scenes, which is great. And we're going to talk about some of we'll talk about some of the questions here live. So Andrew says, we're working to teach analytics to the Air Force and see culture as a big factor in thinking. Does Wharton have a pedagogical approach to problem solving, leveraging analytics? Analytics in a vacuum doesn't work, as you can probably tell us. And again, having to do it in a military setting means that often the stakes are quite higher, in fact, even higher than in business or other areas. So yes, having real world problems, whether they're based on company experiences or organizational experiences, or based on actual professorial experience, in other words, based on their own history, it's important for us not to see analytics or really any of the academic topics in a vacuum, and applying them to problem solving is important. I would say if you don't see that every week, then we have a problem, and we want to know about it, but you will. It's part of it's really part of the Wharton way, as we say, and it started with that factory floor problem solving legacy. Again, there would be no Wharton Business School if there weren't a steel factory that needed the knowledge, and that idea has continued through time. The next question is, beyond specific technology and business practices, how does the program address the latitudinal or multidisciplinary nature of analytics specific to an industry? For example, oil and gas production or healthcare. How does the program help you to manage the multitude of priorities in executive decision making? I think there's a short answer and a long answer for that. The short answer is, as I mentioned, the degree of applicability, especially when you look at the individual methodologies, as you look at the roots of artificial intelligence and machine learning, you look at building neural networks, you look at weighted average decision making, binary decision points, you look at regression analysis. In other words, understanding the correlation of different variables to the outcome and understanding which is actually most meaningful or least meaningful, what's the noise, what's the reality. Those kind of analytic processes are often quite similar as you move from industry to industry. So the short answer has to do with the wide scale applicability, often the surprisingly wide applicability of some of these techniques. The longer answer is we try to do as much as we can by focusing, whether they're case studies or white papers or articles that focus on specific industries, or quite frankly, in the elective process. So, for example, healthcare analytics is an incredibly important field, and we could not do that justice in the core program, so we built an entire 6-week elective out of it. And quite frankly, if time weren't a factor and your time weren't a factor, we'd build a 12 or 20-week elective out of it. But so, for example, healthcare is the type, and frankly, energy analytics is something that may be a next wave elective down the line for some of the same reasons, but definitely healthcare and even areas like financial services or corporate finance sort of fall into that same bucket. But as I said, healthcare probably the number one, because we're all impacted as consumers, and it is a life or death subject for many of us. As we move forward, Sergio says, based on all knowledge assets, have you conducted surveys of other kinds of research on previous participants in order to ask about professional achievements they get as a consequence of your program? Example, promotions, change of job, change of industry. It's a good point, and it's why we have a success coach, because we want to have skin in the game. We can't take credit or blame for your entire career. I don't think you would ask that of us as an academic institution. At the same time, this has to be relevant to your career development, your job search, even your regard within your corporation. That's why we spend a lot of time on the capstone project. We want you to walk back to your boss or your subordinate or your colleague and saying, look what I did over the past 20 weeks, and this is actually how it can impact our industry. So we have a lot of anecdotal data. The reality is that certificate programs have gained such popularity in the last 5 years or so that data is still being worked. I can say that, you can look online. I mean, there's no secrets involved here. You can look online, you'll see that there is a growing level of acceptance. And in some cases, a preference, because what a certificate program like this represents is a dedication to the topic. Whereas a degree program, which again has other benefits, don't get me wrong, but doesn't necessarily represent a commitment to a singular topic such as this. And especially, again, the combination of Wharton and business analytics with all that represents makes for quite a strong certificate. But again, the data is still being developed for that, and we will be, frankly, you're going to be a part of that. The estimated size of the cohort, I may have answered that since then. I apologize. Sometimes the timestamp of the question doesn't always coincide. So this is the first run of the program. We have had thousands of people in Wharton business analytics programs over the last 3 or 4 years that we've run as elementary, initial courses or survey courses. And quite frankly, that was the single biggest driver behind the development of this course, is that people wanted more. At the same time, for this particular course, this is the first run. We expect that we will have somewhere around 50 people per cohort. That may expand to closer to 100 as we move to different cohorts. So, by the end of, and we will be running a new cohort approximately every 3 months. So you can do the math in terms of how large this cohort will be. So within a year, we'll have a couple of hundred people where we can really develop some of the data. But again, this is you have the benefit, the benefit of being in the run where you probably have the single highest level of interaction with faculty, because you got 20 sets of eyes on the faculty team that want to understand how they can get the most out of this course. Pablo says, how does this program differentiate from other former Masters in Science in Business Analytics programs? So this is a different route. So there are MS programs in Business Analytics. This is an MBA type program. In other words, this is a business school program. The level of executives that are in the room, I would say the level of applicability of these problems. In other words, I think the question before about data science in a vacuum, or the idea of using problem solving and coupling that with data science, I think that's answered here. I think that the flavor of a program like this, and we're not the only one out there. I mean, there's some other good certificate programs out there. The flavor of it is, I mean, this is primarily a program for organizational leaders and business people and executives. Master of Science programs tend to be a smattering of people. You'll often get people who are doing this to stay along an academic track. They might be doing that as a step toward a PhD. They might be using it more in a research capacity or a teaching capacity. So again, it doesn't mean that one is better or worse, but this tends to have more of a business or organizational focus. Elaborate more about the utility of business analytics in healthcare. It's a great question. As I said, it was important enough that we developed a whole course around it. This is the one elective that I again, if I had my way, I would make it 3 times as long. Business analytics is everywhere in healthcare. It has to do with, we're seeing it with clinical trials. I mean, if you think about it, the vaccine trials and how people conducted that research, whether it was the mRNA research that led to the vaccine or the actual development, it brought the vernacular of analytics to the dinner table in many cases. And so that's something that I'm happy to answer more offline, but again, that's just one area where there's just no shortage of applicability. The question, could we take more electives than required? Yeah, we could talk to you offline. The electives can be standalone courses. We can work with you on that. Andrew said, there quite frankly, and again, this is not for me to determine on this webinar, there might be fees involved. I just put that caveat out there. But again, a lot of these courses a lot of the electives are modular enough that we could find a way to have you take additional electives. Again, we would, I know the pricing gods would try to make it worthwhile so that you would receive some degree of preference coming from the program. Andrew asks, does the program have focus in geospatial visualization, or is that an elective? We do cover data viz. Data visualization is important. It's an issue of growing importance, because quite frankly, the more people that traffic in business analytics, the more people that traffic in business analytics that don't have a deep understanding of business analytics, and therefore visualization becomes important. And I mean, you have entire companies that are dedicated to creating dashboards and visualization techniques in the field of business analytics. So yes, we touch on that. I can see even doing more on that in terms of in depth in terms of an elective down the line. But quite frankly, there's going to be enough of that in the core that I think you'll enjoy that. How many live classes per week? Well, essentially, there's about an hour about 60 or 70 minutes worth of videos that are on demand. On average, there will be a live session every other week with a faculty member, and then an optional office hour every week. So every week there will be at least one office hour where you can, again, it's optional, but we find that they're quite popular when we run them. And then there will also be a live session on average every other week. Again, if you miss it, anything we do, including this presentation, Robert, anything we do as a live event, as a definition, we record it and we post it on the course platform. For this particular presentation, you can obtain it through your learning advisor. But once you're enrolled in the course, there will be a repository of all recordings of live events. I just want to acknowledge the hour mark. I will stick around for a few minutes. I'm happy to answer questions. I know my colleagues feel the same way. We want to make sure we're answering as much as we can. But again, if you do need to go, please know that you're not it's not, we're not taking any insult to that whatsoever. We want to be respectful of your time. When we do run live events in the course, we'll always be respectful of the top and bottom of the hours. We recognize that we are dealing with busy professionals. That said, I'll stick around and take on some of these questions. And so again, I do want to, I just want to take the opportunity while we have the full boat to just thank you all for your engagement and your interest over the hour. We would love to answer questions. I know you've been in touch with our excellent team of learning advisors. To the extent there are questions that go beyond that, we will love to continue the dialogue. And quite frankly, I look forward to welcoming you to the course as a success coach. But Gaurav, do you want to say anything? And then I will happily return to some of these questions.
Dave, no, thanks. I just want to thank all our participants who joined us today, took out time. I know it's, as you mentioned, Dave, it's not easy considering the current scenario, et cetera, but it's great to see people, who are looking at a program, willing to invest, and it is an extremely relevant topic, especially, what the world has faced recently. It's become even more important for managers, for leaders in their decision-making process to look at analytics, etc. So yes, and of course, Dave, thanks to you for providing a very detailed insight on the program, and also to all our participants who've been here, taken out time, and of course, we look forward to being in touch with you. If any of your questions have been unanswered, or if you need more information on the program, please do reach out to your learning advisor at Emeritus, and we'll be happy to address those questions and assist you with any additional information that you may have. So thank you again. And of course, Dave, we have a few, 2 or 3 more questions in the Q&A. So if it's okay, we could address those, or we could also pick these.
My pleasure. No, as I said, I know some people had to run and I didn't want them to feel like they were missing out. So
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you.
So I know Elizabeth had a great question. So we may have to have this conversation offline, Elizabeth, because we do run into this conversation where people are asking on behalf of a cohort of employees. It really, I think on one hand, this may be exactly what you're looking for, because when we use executives often, the word executive sometimes has a different meaning across different organizational cultures. As you said, the sort of the mid to senior manager / executive is probably a better definition of our target audience. If you're looking for a group of more junior analysts, again, it's not that they won't learn from the course, because again, these are the same professors that teach both MBA students and executive students, and they can teach a reasonably wide range of students, and in the room you're going to have a wide range of perspectives. But we're happy to have that discussion of whether, I mean, we only want the people who think this program is right for them. And in this case, as I said, this could be exactly what you're looking for, or it could be something adjacent. So we're happy to have that discussion with you offline. And as I said, I'll say to your learning advisors, feel free to include me in that discussion. As I said, I have some of my own thoughts there, I think have a lot to do with sort of the learning appetite and level of the executives, and also what you're looking to get out of it specifically. But that might be a longer conversation. As I said, I'm happy to take part in that. Abdi says, pertaining to your comment on analytics and healthcare, being a physician, I am interested in the course as it pertains to healthcare specifically. Do you anticipate a certificate program focused only on analytics and healthcare? Well, in a sense, the healthcare elective will be offered as a standalone course. At the same time, you don't necessarily have the depth that you would get from having gone through the core program beforehand. So it's a lot of it might depend on your ability to make that kind of time and material commitment. I will say the combination of the core program plus the healthcare elective will give you as much depth in healthcare analytics as I really would imagine you'd get anywhere. I have a reasonably, high degree of awareness. I'm not saying I know everything, because there's just too many programs out there, but I know a lot about many of the programs out there, and you're not going to get a stronger healthcare focused program and really substitute the industry by taking, as I said, the core program plus the elective. But again, I'm happy to, that might also be a longer conversation, and we're happy to engage. This is not, a program like this can't be a hard sell. There's some great institutions offering some great programs. Very fortunate that Wharton is one of them, and arguably that's being a little bit modest, and it's worked hard for that. But I want to make sure that it's right for you. And actually, pursuant to that question, what are Wharton's key strengths in business and/or analytics compared to other academic institutions offering analytics courses? I've taught with several courses, several schools, and frankly, they're fantastic schools, all of them. And even when I teach offline in the bricks and mortar world, I enjoy it. I'd say, I mean, Wharton happens to be synonymous with business analytics from its very founding. It was, if it has a fault, quite frankly, it is playing catch up reputationally on when it comes to things like marketing and entrepreneurship and even some pure play leadership. Doesn't mean it doesn't have those capabilities, but reputationally, it is so hardcore focused on analytics. It always has, but even before we were calling it analytics, we used to call it, we would call it data, we'd call it finance, we'd call it linear programming, we'd call it, operations and decision making. But that's, so I'm not, I don't mean to be, it's not a sense of arrogance. It's actually just a recognition that if anything, Wharton has been saddled with the reputation of being, analytics beyond analytics for most of its existence. So I would say in terms of having that legacy or that analytics heritage, combined with, frankly, the hunger to stay on top. I mean, the academic world has become a lot more competitive over the last 2 decades, partly with the proliferation of online courses and just, apprenticeships and other workplace education. And so when you have an area of competency like that, you have to work hard to keep it. And Wharton does that. Again, you just don't get this. I mean, these I actually had two of the faculty members that are with this course I had as teachers when I was in school 20 years ago. And I've just seen, I don't want to say that, the replacements have been better than the originals, but I have to kind of say that the caliber of talent that Wharton has been able to retain and really put through the rigor of the tenure track and publishing and research is quite something. So I'm happy to talk about that more, but as I said, that's something I also invite you. What I guess I invite you to do is also look at some of the individual research centers. So as you get the slide, you'll get the copies of the slides from your learning advisor. That one slide where we talked about the 20 research centers, and I think probably a dozen of them were mentioned on the slide. All those have individual websites, and you'll notice that you'll see some familiar names because the same names that are co-directors of those research centers and authors of the white papers are also going to be teaching this course, and they're doing it based on their own experience. Andrew, you got one more question here. First of all, Andrew, great question. So I hope selfishly I hope you're in the course because you're gonna keep us to task. Working with the federal government, 80% of the work is organizational legal access to data and its use. Does this course address the organizational issues with data access and its use, policies opposed to technology? You were a fly in the room. We literally, about halfway through the design process, there was a, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on this. I think we're out of the hour, so I can say we had an oh shit moment where we said, wait a second, we need to include more from the legal, ethical, and regulatory framework. And so we brought in Kevin Wambach is the face of it, but he sort of was accompanied by other folks as well. And that's why we actually have a legal, ethical module, and organizational is sort of a sidekick to that. That goes along with about a third of the other mod. In other words, it's a running sidetrack, if you will, during the course, because we can't agree more. And especially, we live in the United States, which is sort of considered a middle ground when it comes to data privacy, right? The Europeans are ahead of us all, and GDPR came out of Europe for a reason. But the spirit of GDPR, the General Data Protection Rights Protection, has been obeyed throughout the world, and both Europe, North America, Asia, Middle East, and Africa, down under. And so the idea of privacy, the idea of we talk about big data. We always talk about volume and variety and velocity of data, but we also have to talk about veracity of data. So even, whether it's cleaning data because your million line 2-dimensional spreadsheet has a period instead of a comma, or an MR period next to an MR, or I'm Dave instead of David, and does it recognize me as the same person, to much deeper integrity or regulatory issues or privacy issues or ethical issues. In fact, we go through the Cambridge Analytica scandal quite in a bit of depth, as well as some other sort of higher profile examples, but also ways that can be applicable to the organization. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's an important part of the course, frankly, is having that, both the legal and ethical framework, because it is that check mechanism, it understands where we are in the context, but also the organizational, because what are the barriers? I mean, even from a human standpoint, we have in the private sector, it's often not about access, but it's as much as just pure willingness to adopt analytic solutions to people who think they're losing their jobs. Does the fact that we incorporate objective analytics and decision making mean that we're going to be managed by the rise of the machines, or does it mean we're going to be making better decisions with firmer groundwork, which are going to be harder, easier to support? So I'm going to stop there, Andrew, just because I teach this stuff, so I love it, but it's also I don't want to over stress that or over promote that. I think the answer is a heartfelt yes. So I think we are at the end. As I said, I wanted to make sure to address some of the questions. Gaurav, this is like one of those stop till you drop press conferences, but
right. Thanks. Yes.
But this is important, and I just will say from our standpoint, I will leave you back in the good hands of Gaurav and his team of learning advisors. First of all, I see Elizabeth's question. Let's make sure we follow up with Elizabeth on the question. This is from the insurance perspective of dealing with a cohort of analysts taking this course, because I think we can certainly help her there. But in general, I'll turn it back to Gaurav and just say, to those who do enroll in this course, or even those who engage further in this conversation, and I imagine we'll have another one of these marketing webinars or two, I look forward to our future contact and communication. And I just want to thank you all for the time and questions and engagement today. And please stay healthy and safe out there.
Thank you, Dave, again for hosting such a detailed session, addressing all the questions in detail as well. We sincerely appreciate your time. Thank you to all our participants who've taken out time to attend the session. Thank you for your questions. We look forward to being in touch. In case you have any additional questions, please do reach out to your learning advisors. Also, if you have any questions I did see some of the questions which I did respond to on the fee. We do have an application, a fee benefit as well if you apply before 4th of March, which is of $4,000. So if you are considering applying, we would urge you to apply at the earliest. So do get in touch with your learning advisors at Emeritus. Feel free to reach out to us, and we look forward to being in touch. Wishing you, wherever you are in this world, a wonderful day and a night ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.